Hi everyone, and welcome to today's card tutorial. Today I'm going to be just doing a little bit of a resist technique. I'm going to be heat setting using the new Boho Fall release feathers from the Catherine Puller selection, and I'm going to be making a slimline card. Now, I'll be completely honest, I didn't know where I was going with this card. I just knew the color palette that I wanted to try and give a go in today's card, but I also wanted to use it with re-inkers. Now I've got these Boho Feathers. I absolutely love the detail in these feathers. I've got my trusty Opaque white embossing powder, and here are the Catherine Puller re-inkers. Now I will list them below in the description of the colors that I've used, and I went for a bluey purple kind of combo. I've got a palette there on the left hand side, and then I've also got this ink blending palette that I can squish my ink pads on and any paint as well. So I've just printed it off, designed it, laminated it, and I use it quite frequently. I've got Ranger white cardstock. I'm going to be using the smooth side, and I'm going to pretty much stamp the smallest of the feathers randomly with my WOW embossing pad in clear ultra slow drying. I'm going to prep my cardstock first because I was a bit heavy handed in handling my cardstock first, and I live in a humid area, so even though it's winter, not gonna lie, it's still hot, but I still feel cold. I know I don't really cope well with cold weather. And those that know me know that I'm a frog. Okay, so I'm going to stamp randomly. Now what I've done is, because of the lighting, I couldn't particularly see well where I was stamping. So to save any trouble, because it's slow drying ink, I have enough time to stamp a couple of this randomly and then pour the embossing powder over the top. Then I will stamp again. So I didn't heat set it. I will just stamp first. I'll get all my stamping and pouring of the powder on first. And that way I can kind of see where I've stamped. And you can see the shadow. So when the time of day I was filming, I tend to try and film during the day when it's more a natural light. I don't have artificial. I have some artificial light, but it's not really good with my recording on my phone. That's how I prepare and record my tutorials, is through my iPhone, and the particular light I have doesn't really work well. So here I am randomly stamping. I will work on that too, guys. Like, don't worry, I'll work on my recording techniques. I do this out of a hobby. I do it for the love of it. And you know, like, if I can get a bit of supplement from the affiliate links, then great. But I use crafting as my therapy. I am a mum of 3 kids. 2 are teenagers, and one's just got their license, one's learning to drive, and you know, that definitely tests the patience and the stress levels. I know when I went for a drive with my son, my Apple Watch alluded to the fact that because of the heart rate, I had done and reached my 30-minute goal within that driving lesson. So that goes to show the level of stress that I go through when it comes to driving lessons. They're not bad drivers. I think I might be a little bit of a stress head as well. I'll take a little bit of the blame. All right, so using my heat setting tool, my heat tool, I'm going to put it on heat setting 2. And I'm going to make sure I heat every single one of those leaves up. Now I do trim this down, but I wanted to have a big enough panel so that I can decide how much of this panel I wanted to use. and I didn't want to limit myself when it comes to watercoloring as well. So the technique today is resist. Because we're using watercolor cardstock, I can layer the dye inks as if they were like a watercolor paint. I love that effect that you can get from these dye inks. They work really, really great with watercolor cardstock and layer really well. I love Catherine Pooler inks. They're so vibrant that I had to water them down a lot because they're just such a vibrant color palette. So here are my inks here, and I've got them in the palette. I'm going to put a heck of a lot of water on the left hand side of that palette so I can kind of like rinse it out. Trying to get water in here. I could have used a pipette or just, you know, something different, but I just had to make life difficult for me. Now, my mat that I work on every single crafting session is my Altenew mat. It's a craft mat. I love it because it's big, it's got grids. It's just really, really a good mat. It resists, it cleans really well. So this is my go-to mat. So I am randomly, and you can see how random I'm actually putting this paint on. Now I did spritz that panel just a little bit, a couple of spritz with my Ranger distress sprayer here, mixing the colors up. I don't need it to be perfect. I really wanted a random color palette, but I still wanted you to see the purples and the blues in this card panel here. And I pretty much play with this. I'm like, oh yeah, looks like it's a little bit, you know, light. Now when you're playing with dye inks, and these Catherine Pooler dye inks, when you're watercoloring, they do dry back a little bit lighter than what you think, but not that much. But I know what I had in mind, what I wanted to achieve. So I was just making sure that I was adding and layering all these dye inks on here on this watercolor cardstock. So I've just got two brushes, two round brushes. I don't know what size. These are just ones, honestly, I've had for a very long time. Now, once that panel has dried, with the same re-inkers, I'm actually just going to splatter some of that ink everywhere. I wanted to have a spotty look, random look. I was really, really happy with the end result, and I just went to town doing it. Now I am going to put it on heat setting 1. The heat tool on heat setting 1 is lower fan speed and lower heat. That way I won't wreck my heat embossing, but it will dry the panel. So using my ink blending palette, I've got some Winsor Newton white gouache. I know I totally butchered it, but forgive me. I have got some shimmer paint as well. So I wanted that white gouache to be shimmery. So this is in the Frost White. I'm going to just dip my brush in there, and then I'm going to mix it all up using the ink blending palette. And this is just something I've made. I'm going to spritz a little bit of water just to help with mixing that up, and then I'll spritz a little bit more water because I want it. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flick this white paint and this white mixture onto my card front. Just making sure I'm happy with the consistency. And then I'm going to bang that along the other brush to create like a friction effect so I can get the light splatter look. And I'm just very randomly putting this on. The reason why I choose white gouache because it's quite an opaque paint, and that way the dye ink doesn't go through the actual white gouache and you can see the white splatters. And then I'm just going to heat set this again on heat setting 1 because it's just a drying effect that I want to do. and I'm making sure I'm just going over it really quickly so that I'm not ruining my project. Now I've got Catherine Puller Essentials Slimline Die here. I've got the large panel, and that's what I'm going to use as my card base. So I am going to trim this panel down to size. That's my leftover bit on the left hand side. I'm going to put some foam tape and adhere this down. So I kind of just decided what part of that panel I wanted to keep for my card. And I can totally use that other panel on another card. Now here's the Juniper Mist. All I'm going to do is, I've got the Warm Hug Sentiments here from Catherine Puller. This is the word die. I'm going to ink blend a rectangle white cardstock panel here, and I'm going to put the white sentiment, adhere it down on the Juniper cardstock. So I'll just trim that down, ink this panel up. I could have gone direct to ink, but I didn't really want that ink to be really overbearing. I kind of wanted it just to be almost like a lightly ink blended version of that color. Just inking it around. I'm not being overly careful and fussy. Just making sure I've got some good saturation on there. That's all I'm doing, and then I'm happy with that panel. Okay, so putting that aside, putting some glue behind the sentiment, and then adhering that down just with some liquid glue. And that's my sentiment. Hugs. Keeping it really simple, people. Keeping it really, really simple. I'll just push that up just a little bit. Probably fussed around with it too much. And then I'm just going to add some Crater Lake clear sequins randomly on the card front. And I am done. What do you think? What do you think of using the new Boho Feathers? I absolutely love the detail of the feathers. I don't have anything like that in my stash, so I was super stoked that I've got something so cool like this to add in my stash. And that's all I've done, is to just finish the card off with the Crater Lake sequins. I don't put too many sequins on. I'm not very confident with adding sequins, so my go-to sequence is usually clear, gold, and maybe some more. I do put a bit of bling every now and then, but that's really it. What do you reckon? I love it. I hope you enjoyed today's card creation and you learned something new, and I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. See ya.